This is Cedartown, Georgia. At first glance, it looks like just another small town, but statistically, this is one of the poorest towns in the state. Over one third of all the people here live below the poverty line. The median household income is barely over $30,000 a year. And as we drive through this town, I feel like we'll get a better grasp on what those numbers actually look like. Seeing what I've seen so far, I anticipate seeing abandoned houses, closed businesses, properties falling apart like that one we saw a second ago. But the question is, for me, is what happened here, and is Cedartown getting better or falling behind? By falling behind, I'm like, is it slowly falling behind or is this a rapid decline? I mean, just kind of seeing, what are we like, a minute or two of this town, it's just kind of, it's definitely eye-opening and a little eerie. Look at this. I've got some stats and data on the city too. So this house, man, Cedartown resident population wise, it's got 10,211 residents, and that was as of 2023. Doesn't really seem like it's a growing town at all. But when I was digging in, it actually grew about 1.5% since 2020. So in about 3 years, it actually grew in population size. City is fairly small. It covers right at 9 square miles. And the median age, also, those are the other thing I thought was interesting. Median age is relatively young, 31.5 years old, which is younger than a lot of rural towns here in the South. I think that hints at, families and young adults living here and not as much of a retirement community or retirement area. When I dug into the demographics and the racial, breakdown, the city was right. It was 47% white, 23% black or African American, and 27% Hispanic or Latino. And it was about 12.5% of residents are foreign born, which I also thought was kind of interesting, with it being kind of this Cedartown, Georgia is about 30 minutes off the interstate. Well, here is a food store that is literally in the middle of the neighborhood. I'm driving. One of the things I was searching for was houses, and so, not that I'm personally buying one, but I was curious house prices, and so we kind of looked at the income, different things, and so looking at this house, where is it at? It's not this one. Again, another house that's kind of dilapidated, needs some help. I think this is it. So this house online right now is listed for sale at $52,000. And so I wanted to drive by it to see what, roughly 50,000 would buy you in Cedartown, Georgia. So this is it. This is what you could get for 50,000 in Cedartown. Drop a comment and let me know, would you buy a home for 50,000 bucks in this town? Looking at the income, we talked about that earlier, or I mentioned that earlier, so we'll pull that up. So median household income was $32,064, which is way below Georgia's estate. The state's median household income was $74,600. So that's more than half, less than half, which probably just kind of shows the issues that the city has. So we're in the, I just pulled out of a neighborhood. This looks more like an industrial road area. But with that household income, the per capita income is $26,593, which again is also still much lower than the state national averages. That's for a little over $2,000 a month per capita income, which is not a lot to be able to survive on. One striking stat for this town in general is the poverty rate. So poverty rate was 35.5%, which is more than 2 times the average of the state, Georgia as a whole. So definitely a poverty-stricken area. And I'm not really sure why that is, but when you think about, 35.5%, that's pretty high. That's like saying as you're walking down the street, more than 1 out of every 3 people are going to be living living in poverty, below the poverty line. We're going to pull into this Creekside area. We talked about how that population had increased, but also poverty increased as well. Let me find that number. So it was just slightly. So it slightly increased year to year, which means that, economic challenges in this area are ongoing. But while the population increases, the poverty rate is increasing as well. And I mean, I definitely want to explore more of this town, but from what I've seen so far, you certainly can see the poverty and kind of the struggles of the citizens here. With that home that was $52,000 we just saw, the median property value in Cedartown in general is $148,000, which is also another number that's significantly lower Georgia's median, which is $272,900. And the home ownership rate is 44.7, which I was kind of intrigued with that. With the poverty rate, I mean, 44.7 is close to half, but still that's way below the national average, which is closer to 65%. I did see when I was doing the research, there was another number where, so it said approximately 6.7% of the housing units in this town are vacant, which kind of shows the unused or abandoned properties, unused properties around the area. But just kind of seeing this, the poverty and the lower wages, lower income, you would think, and it is true, that the cost of living is lower. So it's, significantly cheaper than the U.S. average. The cost of living index was 84. And so, it is cheaper to live here, but also the income lags behind. So it all kind of makes sense, right? I dug into the rent because I was curious, home ownership. I also wanted to look into rent. So median rent here is right at $857 a month, which, is lower than a lot of areas. For, $850, basically you can have an apartment or somewhere to rent, but, still probably it is relatively high to the local wages and what people are earning in this area. Driving around so far, I don't really feel unsafe at all, but, the crime here is higher than the average, and maybe that makes sense with kind of the poverty area, the poverty challenges that it has. Okay, so overall crime rate, 2,360 crimes per 100,000 people. And so that's about 11% higher than the U.S. average. And the violent crime rate, 368 per 100,000, which is also above the national average. And then, crimes in general, because also property crimes are up for this area. It looks like someone was there, but it's kind of an abandoned truck in the middle of nowhere. And this looks like nature has overtaken it. And this is kind of next to that abandoned truck. There's a camper that also looks abandoned. And here's a house that needs some TLC. I'm assuming it's one of those abandoned, unused areas or houses here. Someone's got some chickens. You hear that? I think it's in that pen, that cage. I need to circle back to that. I'm gonna go drive through that little area. Check out the chicken situation. That was a dead end anyway, so that worked out. This street looks like a dead end too, but I'll drive down it as well. You know, it's kind of, when you think about some of the people that live in larger cities, you wouldn't assume that, you know, you're not used to chickens in the area in the way, but here in kind of the smaller southern rural towns, looks like they got look at that, there they are. Got a chicken pen, a rooster pen right there. And don't judge me because I definitely don't know my differences between chickens and roosters, but I'm seeing this is another above ground pool. Maybe a thing here. I looked into education too. I was kind of curious about that. It was right at 76% of adults do graduate and are high school graduates with a high school diploma. But when you look at Georgia as a whole, it's lower than many other Georgia cities and below the state average as well. But with that, you know, 76% have the high school diploma, only 17% have a bachelor's degree or higher. Which kind of makes sense too with the poverty rate and the poverty area and the income and the wages that people are earning in this area. Wow. And so, you know, look at this. So some people are kind of like half and half with HOAs, right? And they don't want an HOA to tell you what to do. But this, to me, is kind of a prime example why you would want something that kind of restricts, because this would, you know, bring down the property value of all these homes that are around this area. This is down another street. I'm going to stay on this street, but I just want you to see some other homes that are here that would suffer from that. Because if you're out, it's raining. If you're out looking for a home, is that, you know, if you see that and maybe this next home is for sale, it's not something you're going to be interested in buying, right? If that's your neighbor. But it is kind of interesting how there's, you know, some normal or, you know, houses that aren't abandoned are kind of falling down right next to that other one. Kind of like hit or miss in this area, it seems like. What other? Unemployment. Unemployment's around 7.4 to 7.9%, which is, you know, higher than many areas, but that's unemployment for the city. And one other thing, where's that at? So I looked at, you know, households with computers, internet. There was some information on it. But it said 89% of the households here have a computer and 84% have internet, which I think is great, you know, and for this kind of smaller area with the wages and the poverty, I was curious what that would look like. But I mean, 84% is not bad. And in this day and age, can you imagine being a kid though and not having no internet? So, you know, one couldn't learn what a lot of people were probably learning in school, and then also, you know, cable. I guess cable's still around, but all the streaming platforms you can't really watch without internet too. See, there's a larger house. And this is all still on that same road that had that house with all the stuff up there. And so this looks like the Cedartown Civic Auditorium is right here. So they have different events in place. I mean, it's nice that there's, I guess, like an arts presence. I'm sure there's not something every weekend, but it's nice that they have that venue. And I believe that it's like that is attached to City Hall. So here is the Cedartown City Hall right next to it. I'm going to turn down here because on the map it looked like, I think, like police and fire station. There are a few things right down here, so I wanted to check that out and see what that looked like for this town. There's the police department. Here's our fire station. Alright, so it looks like an abandoned, I think that's Popeye's probably. One thing, when I was looking on this map, this is kind of one of the main roads here. I'm sorry that it's raining, but so there's a Jack's, they have McDonald's, the Popeye's obviously closed, but they had some other restaurants. I think there was or fast food-ish, I would call it. Like there was a Bojangles, which I was kind of surprised, for this town, this size, income, that some of the places were here, which is nice for the residents. Let's see. I'm gonna drive down the street and see what else we can find. So again, one of the main ones. There's a Edward Jones, which is like a financial services. I think they do investments and help you with 401ks. I think that's kind of interesting. That's a franchise that is here. That someone picked that in this town. So you got the restaurants. There's a Crystal's too. Like there's a Kroger, so a nicer grocery store too. I guess in my head I just didn't think this much stuff would be in a town of about 10,000 people. But good for them. This looks like a local motel. Probably not somewhere I would stay, but you do have options here in Cedartown. There's that Kroger again. Now this is, I saw this, I wanted to check this out. This is a lake, or there's a lake around some homes. This is called Springdale Lake. And so I was curious, there are some homes that look like they were on the water, so I was curious what those look like compared to a lot of the homes that we've seen so far. So I wanted to drive through this area and see what we saw here. Peaceful lake area. So the lake's on that side, and on this side is kind of some more houses that go way up the hill, but let's check some of these out. Back on this main road, and I wanted to go find the downtown area. With it being this size of a town, I was curious to know what the downtown looked like, because we've seen some homes falling apart and some dilapidated houses and some abandoned ones, but what does their downtown area look like? I thought that would be for sure something I wanted to check out. You gotta turn from there. I think that's where the police station, all that was, the city hall. If we go over this way, I think looks like GPS is showing us that downtown's right up ahead. All right, this looks more downtown-ish. I believe this is kind of their main downtown strip right here. Honestly, part of this, I mean, I'm seeing a few closed businesses, but in my head, it was going to look different than this. But it doesn't, you know, I could see this as a little Hallmark movie downtown area, right? With the trees and... Okay. There are some, and I think, I think with this camera view, I don't know if you can see, but there were several businesses that were closed, but it didn't look bad, right? Like it wasn't dilapidated or falling apart, falling down. I think I'm gonna loop back through and show you, and just kind of maybe focus on one side so you can kind of see what I saw. This looks like this is the visitor center. I feel like train tracks, which is kind of cool. And I saw on the back end, yeah, wall art. So there was one other one over there, but we didn't see it on the way in. I'm trying to focus on the right, because it looked like, I mean, on both sides there were definitely some closed businesses, but just kind of driving through, you don't really see or notice that. See, there's one for lease, that one's closed. That one's for lease, and it's kind of got paper on it. This billboard says it's for rent. So some of it, this action room, game room area, you know, it looks like it's open, or I mean, the paint and the signage looks good, but it's just closed. There's another one. One thing I think I saw was like a Coca-Cola something. It's towards it. It'll be towards the end, but also like there was some boarded up stuff. I don't know if the Coke place is open. Let's check this out. Okay, here's that Coke place. It's a Coca-Cola museum, and maybe that's just next to it, possibly. But it looks like the Coca-Cola place is open, and this is closed next to it. All right, yeah, Coca-Cola place is open. Here's a big parking lot for it. And it looks like this. I just thought that. Look at this little gas station. I guess it was a old gas station that's been converted into business, but it's now closed and up for lease. But it's kind of interesting little. I don't know what you put in there, but it could be pretty cool. Drop a comment. What would you put in this business area? Okay, so back off of that, I wanted to check out a few more little neighborhood areas so we can really get a good grasp of all things Cedartown. This I would assume is probably a daycare. Which is kind of nice that it's in the middle of a neighborhood. If you had kids, you could just let them walk or walk them over there. Or a short drive on your way into work. Let's see. Oh, there's the sign. Yeah, daycare right there. Nice bright red house. Seen a few trampolines in the front yards as well as those above ground swimming pools. I don't know if someone's living in that one or not.